Oh, brother Mourn, have you heard? Have you heard the cries of children silenced before they even learn what trust means? Have you seen their innocence traded for power? Their pain hidden behind curtains of respectability and denial? Oh, brother Mourn, have you seen? Have you seen a man pinned to the ground because of his skin? The breath pressed out of him while cameras rolled and the world debated whether his life was worth its weight in air? Have you seen mothers carry coffins too small? Fathers breaking under the sound of a final gunshot that the law calls order? Oh, brother Mourn, have you felt the shadow of a hand raised not in love but in violence? Inside homes, where walls keep secrets louder than screams? Have you felt the loneliness of rooms filled with silence, where the mind itself turns against the body and despair whispers louder than hope? Oh, brother Mourn, have you noticed? Have you noticed the prisons swelling, brown and black bodies stacked like statistics, futures signed away for profit? Have you noticed how Africa still bleeds? Gold, oil, cobalt, ripped from its soil while its children starve on land that should have fed them? Oh, brother Mourn, have you remembered? Have you remembered the promises of faith turned into weapons? Scriptures twisted into shackles, pulpits raised to justify greed? Have you remembered the poets silenced, the books banned, the songs cut short before their chorus could reach us? You think grief is private. You think it happens in rooms with closed doors, in the space between your ribs, in the hour after midnight when sleep won't come. You think mourning is what you do alone. But what if I told you that your grief, the one you carry for the person you lost, the childhood that was taken, the future that dissolved, is not separate from the grief of a mother in Gaza pulling her daughter from rubble? What if the ache you feel when you remember what was stolen from you is the same ache the earth feels as glaciers calve into warming seas? What if the silence in your throat, the words you can't say about what happened to you in the dark, is the same silence that lets atrocities continue in broad daylight? Oh brother, oh sister, I am calling you into a mourning that has no borders. Not because your pain isn't real, but because it is real, and it is everywhere. It is in the 12-year-old sold by her uncle. It is in the black man who can't breathe under a knee. It is in the woman who sleeps with a knife under her pillow. It is in the ocean choking on plastic. It is in you. This is not a meditation. This is not a lecture. This is a lament. Ancient, unfashionable, necessary. And it begins with this recognition. We are not grieving separate tragedies. We are grieving the same wound, wearing different faces, speaking different languages, crying the same salt. So I ask you now, will you mourn with me? Let us begin where the wound begins. In childhood, in the place that should be sacred. There are approximately 1 inch 9 girls and 1 inch 20 boys who will experience sexual abuse before they turn 18. Read that again. Not in some distant country, not in history. Now, here, in the house next door, in the church basement, in the bedroom where a nightlight flickers. Pedophilia is not an aberration. It is an epidemic disguised as isolated incidents. Every 2 minutes, someone in America is sexually assaulted. Every 2 minutes. And most of them are children. Most of them know their abuser. Most of them will never tell. The violation itself is unspeakable, but there is a second violence that comes after: the silence. The family that closes ranks. The community that whispers, "Are you sure? He's such a nice man." The legal system that asks what the child was wearing, how the child behaved, whether the child is lying. This complicity, this institutional, cultural, familial refusal to see, is not passive. It is an active form of abuse. It tells the child, your pain is less important than our comfort. Your truth is less valuable than our reputation. I know this silence. I have felt it in my own throat, the words turning to glass, cutting on the way up. The specific details don't matter here. What matters is the shape of it, the way trauma reorganizes time so that you're always living in two moments at once. The moment it happened, and the moment you're trying to pretend it didn't. What matters is that this is not my story alone. It's written on millions of bodies, in millions of locked rooms, in the learned flinch when someone moves too quickly toward you. Now shift the lens. Keep the wound open. Let's talk about skin. George Floyd died over the course of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's long enough to listen to a song, long enough to boil water for pasta, long enough for a crowd to gather and film and beg for his life. And still, the knee pressed down. But police brutality is just the visible apex of a pyramid built from 10,000 smaller cruelties. It's the resume with a black-sounding name that gets half the callbacks. It's the child in elementary school already learning that her hair is unprofessional, her voice too loud, her existence too much. It's the man who has to make himself smaller in elevators, has to speak softer, has to perform non-threatening in every interaction or risk being perceived as dangerous simply for occupying space. Racism is exhausting in a way that people who don't experience it cannot fathom. It's not just the overt violence, though that's real and deadly. It's the accumulated weight of being seen as a problem, a threat, and a statistic. It's code switching until you forget which voice is really yours. It's the hypervigilance that becomes your operating system. Scanning every room, reading every face, calculating risk before you even say hello. And the data bears witness to what bodies already know. Black Americans are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. Black students are suspended and expelled at 3 times the rate of white students for the same infractions. The wealth gap hasn't closed since the Civil Rights Act. It's widened. Redlining doesn't exist on paper anymore, but its maps are still drawn in school districts, in hospital access, in which neighborhoods get trees and parks, in which get industrial waste. The grief here is dual. Grief for those killed, and grief for those who must continue living under the constant low-grade terror that they might be next. That their son might not come home. That a traffic stop might become an execution. That their skin has been weaponized against them in a country that claims to see no color. And now we turn to the war that doesn't make headlines because it's so constant it's become weather. The war against women's bodies. 1 in 3 women globally will experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime, most often by an intimate partner. Let that statistic break apart in your mind. 1 in 3. That means in any room of women, you can count. 1, 2, there. 1, 2, there. The violence is so normalized, we call it domestic. As if adding that word makes it smaller, more manageable, of a private matter. But there is nothing domestic about a fist, nothing private about rape, nothing intimate about control that masquerades as love. Femicide, the killing of women because they are women, claims 87,000 lives each year. That's 238 women every single day. They are killed by partners who couldn't accept rejection, by strangers who believed they were entitled to bodies not their own, by honor killings, by dowry disputes, by the simple fact of being female in a world that has monetized, objectified, and brutalized women since recorded history began. And for every woman killed, there are thousands more living in the prison of fear. They clutch keys between their fingers walking to their car. They check the back seat before getting in. They text friends when they arrive home safe. They learn which streets to avoid, which bars have good lighting, which men have that look in their eyes. They live in their own homes with men who might at any moment decide that love means possession and possession means punishment. I think of the girl I knew in college who would flinch at sudden movements. The cousin who wore long sleeves in summer. The coworker who always had an excuse for the bruise. The friend who disappeared from our lives and then, months later, sent a single text. "I'm okay now. I got out." How many women are still inside, trapped not just by violence, but by the economic dependency, the children, the threats, the shame that somehow attaches to the victim and not the perpetrator? But let's go deeper now, into the wound you can't photograph, the one that doesn't leave visible marks. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, affecting over 2 million people. Suicide claims 700,000 lives each year. One person every 40 seconds. These aren't just numbers. They're someone's brother who stopped answering texts, someone's daughter who smiled at Thanksgiving and was gone by Christmas, someone's own reflection in the mirror at 3 a.m., wondering why surviving feels harder than not. We live in an epidemic of loneliness so pervasive that the US Surgeon General issued an advisory calling it a public health crisis. Not poverty, not even obesity, loneliness. The ache of being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. The terror of your phone not ringing. The despair of realizing you could disappear and no one would notice for days, weeks, maybe longer. I have ADHD, which means my brain is wired for distraction, for forgetting, for starting 17 things and finishing none. But it also means I understand what it's like to feel broken by design, to watch everyone else seem to navigate life with a manual you never received. The depression that comes with it isn't just chemical, it's existential. It's the weight of feeling like a failure at being human, at the basic tasks everyone else seems to handle without thinking. And here's the cruelest part. We live in a culture that treats mental health like a personal failing rather than a societal symptom. Take a pill, practice self-care, do yoga, manifest abundance, as if individual solutions could fix a collective sickness. As if the problem isn't that we've built a world that values productivity over presence, profit over people, the grind over the sacred necessity of rest. We're not depressed because we're weak. We're depressed because we're living in systems designed to extract rather than nourish. Because we're alienated from meaningful work, from community, from the natural world, from our own bodies. Because we're told our worth is measured in output, in followers, in how well we perform normalcy, while everything inside is screaming. The isolation isn't a bug. It's a feature. Lonely people buy more. Depressed people don't organize. When you're drowning in your own mind, you don't have energy to question why the world is structured this way, who benefits from your suffering, what could be different. So we mourn the lost ones. Those who couldn't hold on, who saw no other door, who chose silence over the noise of enduring. But we also mourn the living dead, those who wake up every day to a life that feels like suffocation, who go through motions with the lights off inside, who have forgotten what it feels like to want something, to hope for something, to believe that tomorrow might be different than today. Oh brother, oh sister, do you feel it yet? The way these wounds connect? The child who is violated grows into the teenager who can't trust touch. The black boy who learns his body is dangerous becomes the man who carries armor in his nervous system. The woman who survives abuse develops hypervigilance that looks like anxiety disorder. The isolated soul who sees no future becomes a statistic in a crisis we refuse to name as what it is. A society eating its own children. We are not separate. We are not safe. And we cannot heal what we will not see. The United States holds 25% of the world's prisoners while representing only 5% of its population. 2 million human beings in cages. But the horror isn't just in the number. It's in what the number reveals. That we never abolished slavery, we simply moved it indoors and renamed it justice. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except as punishment for crime. Read that exception clause again. It's not a loophole. It's an instruction manual. And so, we built the largest prison system in human history, fed by laws designed to criminalize blackness. Vagrancy laws after emancipation, crack versus powder cocaine sentencing disparities, stop and frisk, 3 strikes policies that put people away for life over minor offenses. Private prisons profit $374 million annually. They need bodies to fill beds. They lobby for longer sentences, for criminalization of more behaviors, for a pipeline that starts in underfunded schools and ends in cells where labor is mandatory and pays pennies per hour. Angola Prison in Louisiana sits on a former plantation. The prisoners, overwhelmingly black, still pick cotton, still work the same fields their ancestors bled in. Tell me that's not designed. Tell me that's coincidence. And it's not just those inside who suffer. It's the children growing up without fathers. The mothers working 3 jobs to put money on commissary accounts. The families torn apart by a system that destroys human connection and calls it rehabilitation. It's entire communities destabilized. Entire generations learning that the state is not here to protect them, but to extract from them. Let's follow the chain back further. Let's talk about the continent that built the modern world and was never paid. 12 million Africans stolen and sold. 12 million who survived the Middle Passage, but estimates suggest another 2 million died in the crossing. Their bodies fed to sharks, their names erased from history. The wealth generated by slavery didn't disappear when abolition came. It compounded. It built banks and universities and insurance companies. It flows through every stock portfolio, every inherited estate, every system of power that exists today. But slavery was just the first phase. Then came colonialism. European powers carving up the continent like a birthday cake at the Berlin Conference of 1884. No Africans present. No consent asked. Just lines drawn on maps that cut through ethnic groups, through kingdoms, through sense itself. Lines that would later become borders, that would later become wars. The British stole $45 trillion from India during colonial rule. France still controls the currency of 14 African nations through the CFA franc, collecting colonial tax decades after supposed independence. The Congo lost 10 million people under Belgian King Leopold's regime, half its population, while rubber was extracted to make bicycle tires for Europe. Hands were cut off for failing to meet quotas, children murdered in front of their parents. The horror was so extreme that even other colonial powers, themselves committing atrocities, were appalled. And today the extraction continues with better PR. Cobalt mined by children in the Democratic Republic of Congo powers your smartphone. Coltan from conflict zones enables your laptop. Chocolate harvested by trafficked children from West Africa sits in your pantry. Oil companies destroy the Niger Delta and pay pennies in royalties, while Nigerian communities drink poisoned water. Western corporations patent traditional medicines and seeds that African communities have cultivated for millennia, then sell them back at markup. Every diamond has blood in it. Every barrel of oil has a life expectancy attached. Every cheap electronic device has small hands embedded in its circuits. We are not separate from this. Our comfort is built on their suffering. Our convenience is their catastrophe. And what do we do with all this stolen wealth? We turn it into garbage. Fast fashion produces 92 million tons of textile waste annually. A new clothing item is worn on average 7 times before being discarded. 7 times. We're drowning in things we don't need, that don't make us happy, that fill the God-shaped hole in our chests with polyester and planned obsolescence. The average American sees 4,000 to 10,000 advertisements per day. Every one of them telling you you're not enough. Not thin enough, not successful enough, not happy enough. But this product, this purchase, this next thing will finally complete you. It won't. It never does. But the hunger persists because the hunger is the point. Satisfied people don't consume endlessly. Content people don't work themselves to death. The system needs you empty, needs you reaching, needs you believing that meaning can be purchased. I think about my own impulse to scroll when I'm anxious, to buy something when I'm sad, the dopamine hit of a package arriving, the brief sense of possibility before opening it, and then the inevitable deflation. The thing is never the thing. The purchase is never the answer. But I keep doing it because we've all been trained to confuse acquisition with fulfillment, transaction with connection, having with being. We're mourning the hunger that cannot be fed because we're feeding it the wrong food. We're aching for community and being sold subscriptions. We're longing for purpose and being offered productivity hacks. We're dying of spiritual starvation in the wealthiest civilization in human history. Here's the thing about capitalism. It doesn't care if you live or die. It cares if you produce. You are not a person within this system. You are a unit of labor, a consumer, a data point, a resource to be extracted until extraction is no longer profitable. 3 men own more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans. Read that again. 3 men. While 38 million Americans live in poverty, while medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcy, while people die rationing insulin because pharmaceutical companies have the freedom to charge $300 for a vial that costs $10 to produce. This isn't an accident. This isn't a glitch that needs patching. This is the system working exactly as designed. Capitalism requires poverty. It requires desperation. It requires a permanent underclass of people with no choice but to accept whatever wages, whatever conditions, whatever indignities are offered, because the alternative is homelessness, starvation, death. And it's killing us, literally. Life expectancy in the United States has declined for 3 consecutive years. The only other country experiencing this is Syria, which is in an active war zone. We're dying of despair, suicide, overdose, liver disease from drinking ourselves numb. Deaths of despair have tripled since 2000. This is what it looks like when a society optimizes for profit at the expense of everything else. And when capitalism exhausts the resources of one region, it moves to another, often at gunpoint. Since 2001, America's post-9 divided by 11 wars have killed over 900,000 people. That's a conservative estimate. The true number is likely millions when you count indirect deaths from infrastructure destruction, disease, starvation. And for what? Oil, geopolitical positioning, defense contracts that enrich weapons manufacturers while children are incinerated by drones. Currently, 110 million people worldwide have been forcibly displaced from their homes. The highest number ever recorded. They are fleeing war, climate collapse, persecution, poverty, all of which trace back to systems of extraction and domination. They cross deserts. They board boats not meant for open water. They watch their children drown in the Mediterranean. They reach borders only to find cages, camps, walls built by nations that destabilize their homelands and now refuse them refuge. The West bombs your village, then criminalizes you for fleeing. Extracts your resources, then calls you an economic migrant. Destroys your future, then asks why you can't just stay home and fix things. The cruelty is not incidental, it's structural. And through it all, faith, which should be a salve, which should be a sanctuary, becomes another weapon. Priests abuse children, and the church moves them to new parishes. Megachurch pastors preach prosperity gospel to congregations drowning in debt while they fly private jets. Religious extremists bomb clinics, execute apostates, mutilate girls' genitals in God's name. Faith becomes justification for every horror. Slavery, colonization, genocide, subjugation of women, persecution of LGBTQ+ people, holy wars that have bled us for millennia. I don't mourn religion itself. I mourn what it could have been. I mourn the perversion of sacred texts to serve power. I mourn every soul that sought transcendence and found only control. Every mystic burned, every truth teller silenced, every prophet commodified and sanitized until their revolutionary message becomes a greeting card slogan. And when the poets try to speak, when the artists try to show us what we've become, we imprison them. We ban their books. We defund their institutions. We tell them to make something more positive, more marketable, less threatening to the status quo. In 2023, over 1,600 books were banned from US schools and libraries, the highest number in decades. Most of them by or about people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, stories of racism and oppression. We're literally erasing the voices that would help us understand how we got here. Meanwhile, activists are labeled terrorists. Journalists are murdered. Whistleblowers are prosecuted while war criminals walk free. We live in a world where telling the truth is more dangerous than committing atrocities, where naming the wound is treated as more offensive than inflicting it. But the earth doesn't need us to speak for it. It's speaking in a language we've pretended not to understand. The last 8 years have been the 8 hottest on record. 500 million animals died in Australia's bushfires. Glaciers that have existed for 10,000 years are melting. The Amazon rainforest, the lungs of the planet, is approaching a tipping point where it will transform from carbon sink to carbon source, from forest to savanna, and there's no reversing it. 30% of all birds in North America have vanished since 1970. 3 billion birds gone. The insects are disappearing. The coral reefs are bleaching. The oceans are acidifying. We're living through the 6th mass extinction event, and we're the asteroid. And the poorest, who contributed least to this catastrophe, suffer first and worst. Island nations swallowed by rising seas. Droughts in East Africa creating famine. Heat waves in India killing thousands. Climate refugees, though we don't call them that because then we'd have to admit causation, have to acknowledge that our air conditioning, our cars, our endless consumption is stealing their futures. The earth is not dying, it's being murdered. And the murderers have names, addresses, stock portfolios. Exxon knew about climate change in 1977 and spent the next 40 years funding denial. BP invented the concept of the personal carbon footprint to shift responsibility from corporations to individuals. Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips. They knew, they lied, they profited, and now we're all paying the price. The planet is mourning with us. Or maybe we're finally learning to mourn with it. So here we are, at the center of the clearing, where we must face the hardest truth. We are not only victims, we are also perpetrators. We are also bystanders. We are also complicit. Every time we scroll past the atrocity because we can't bear one more trauma. Every time we buy the cheap shirt without asking who made it. Every time we know something is wrong and we say nothing because speaking up might cost us a job, a relationship, to our comfort. Every time we choose convenience over consciousness, numbness over engagement, personal survival over collective resistance. I am complicit. You are complicit. We're all swimming in systems so vast and so normalized that extraction looks like normalcy, that violence looks like order, that apocalypse looks like Tuesday. And perhaps the deepest grief is this: knowing how much suffering is allowed to continue, how many reports filed and ignored, how many witnesses who saw and stayed silent, how many governments that could intervene but don't because intervention doesn't serve corporate interests, how many times we collectively chose property over people, profit over planet, comfort over justice. The grief is not just for what's been done. It's for what's being done right now while we have this conversation. A child is being trafficked. A forest is being clear-cut. A prisoner is being beaten. A species is going extinct. Someone is drowning in the Mediterranean. Someone is burying their daughter. Someone is deciding that today is the day they can't go on. And we all know, the information is available. The statistics are published. The testimonies are recorded. We know, and still the machine grinds on.